I auditioned for and got a part in the Texas Rennaissance Festival. They asked me to play the character of the Earl of Surrey, a renowned 16th century poet who introduced iambic pentameter to the English culture. Now, that's a form of poetry that Shakespeare used for his sonnets. And I realized very quickly I was not going to be able to write 14-line poems with improv. I couldn't do that. So I invented my own form of poetry. It had 2 lines that rhymed and 1 that didn't. And it went really well with the patrons. And I used it for love poems and insults and everything in between. And it was such a delight every weekend at fair for me to be able to learn improv and street theatre while being in character. And the joy and laughter from the patrons really uplifted my soul. Some of the performers were professional actors and others were just regulars. And I was assigned to a group called the King's Men. And Brad was the leader of that group. And he seemed like a knowledgeable fellow. He knew all the people, he knew all the ropes, and he had the Van Dyke goatee and the handlebar moustache to prove it. Now, Brad was a real help to a lot of the newcomers, and he helped me especially in how I was going to interact with the other characters in the performance company, the king and the queen, the royals, the visiting dignitaries, and of course the peasants and the barbarians and the fairies. That was always fun. Now, Brad's love life was an ongoing saga. He had courted many of the performance company women with the same poem, telling them each that it was written for them. Brad's reputation spread, and so did his single status. Brad's character was fictional, like his love life, and he decided he would play a poet because he had a poem. Oh, Mandy, thy name is the name the moon calls to the wind to tell of your beauty. Now, because we were poets, we decided that we would actually have a poetry contest to entertain the patrons. We came up with a poetry game, and we would approach a female patron and ask if they would like to judge our poetry. And when they said yes, I would step in and tell one of my short poems. And then it was Brad's turn. Oh, Sharon, thy name is the name that the moon calls to the wind to tell of your beauty. And of course, Brad won every time. And my character would storm off in a huff to get out of there. And after the patron was out of sight, we'd meet up again 100 yards down the road and we'd do it again. Some of my poems were really quite silly. Oh, thy nose is so cute, it doth so suit the middle of thy face. And Brad would recite, oh, Jennifer, thy name is the name that the moon calls to the wind to tell of your beauty. One time, after a poetry contest, Brad didn't reappear. And finally, later in the day, when there was another show we were at together, I asked him what had happened. And he proudly showed me a piece of paper with a name and a number from it from the woman who had liked his poem. Now, this poem is fabulous if you've heard it only for the first time. After 27 times, I felt like the moon needed a new muse. Apparently, we were supposed to be entertaining the audiences, and Brad was more interested in picking up patrons. Now, Brad's quirks did not stop at poetry. Brad also owned a mannequin. He had got this by working in a warehouse when they had retail store cast-offs, and he had obtained a female mannequin. Her name, he told us, was Cindy. Now, we would camp out, the performance company would camp out in the campgrounds every weekend. And I was assigned to Brad's tent circle because I was in his performance group. And there was Cindy standing naked outside his tent with a hand up in the air. And that gave some of the performance company members license to hang things like branches and trash bags and cast-off costumes. And Brad just loved the attention. Of course, behind his back, the mannequin was weird. And in fact, Cindy was the brunt of many, many jokes. Maybe that's why his personal love life was not so good, because behind his back, all the performance companies said, yeah, Cindy is Brad's girlfriend. But so did Brad. On the last evening of the last weekend of rehearsals, the entertainment director held a soiree. There was a lot of free booze and laughter and celebration, and it was a lot of fun. Sometime during the middle of the celebrations, 8 of us walked back to camp, and we picked up Cindy, leaving just her support ball behind, and we dragged her over to the battle mound. Now, the battle mound itself was a special place in Fair. The SCA, the Society for Creative Anachronisms, used it to have their battle reenactments. We called them the Duct Tape Brigade. Why? Well, because their weapons were foam and duct tape. The year before, they had a show where they had to hang a character, so they built a scaffold on the battle mound. So we took Cindy and hung her from the scaffold, taking care to wrap the ropes around her very carefully so we wouldn't do any damage. And then we went back to the festivities. Now, Brad was a little pissed at me at this particular point. And the reason was that when he came back with a name and number, I decided I needed to beat him at this poet game. And so every weekend when I drove to Fair, I would write more short poems. And of course, they were quite silly, but I wrote one that would beat him hands down. So the next time we tried it, I asked him to go first. Oh, Julia, thy name is the name that the moon calls to the wind to tell of your beauty. And the lady just loved it. And then I told her to stand there, raise her arms with her elbows bent. And then I recited, thy elbow 'tis bent, a gift heaven sent, for me to rush in for a hug. And I rushed in for a hug, and I won the contest. Brad was livid, and he wouldn't storm off in a huff, so I put my nose in the air and I strolled away like the winner that I was. And we never played that poetry game again. And now I'm the ringleader of taking away his Cindy. We were back in camp and he rolled in drunk shouting, she's not there. Well, we'd given him enough clues. We'd written a little sign and put it on her stand that said, Brad, I'm sick of you leaving me alone all day long. I'm running off to get plastered and I'm going to join the SCA and fix my life with duct tape. We thought that was enough clues. But back in camp, Brad rolls in, stinking drunk, shouting, she's not there. Well, we just feigned ignorance, of course. We discovered that he had got the note, ran off to the battle mound, and couldn't find her. So we all set off to the battle mound, all 8 of us plus Brad, mumbling all the way, swearing at us. We arrived at the battle mound. Cindy was gone. We were in deep trouble. We scoured the fair and there was no sign of Cindy anywhere. Well, Brad was devastated. Cindy was so important to him. It was his girlfriend after all. So we passed the hat. We raised $200. We discovered that the mannequin had cost him nothing, so he was rich by $200. So he relented and we became friends again. But the mystery of Cindy's disappearance still remained. The following year, several of us were back again, albeit this time there was no naked mannequin in our campground. I asked the maintenance crew if they had seen a mannequin on the last night of rehearsals the year before. And their denials and dismissals said it all. So I pushed a little further and found the real story. Every weekend, the maintenance crew cleaning up found that the sight of a naked mannequin in the performance company campground really offended them. They did not like Cindy at all. And apparently somewhere between our prank and Brad turning up to find her, they had driven past the battle mound on a tractor and seized their opportunity. They took her down, unceremoniously carted her to the dumpster and threw her in, and Cindy was no more. The pranksters had been inadvertently pranked. And the story of Cindy, saga is over. And that year, Brad seemed to be a different person. Of course, he didn't have a naked mannequin girlfriend anymore, but he met a real-life girlfriend. And he is now married happily with the same lady. And for me, I never have to hear that poem ever again. Thank you.